If you're having a good time at WrestleMania, give me a hell yeah. Hell yeah. Welcome to this episode of Weekly in Sports. I am Scott McGregor. The Weekly in Sports podcast era has begun. This is episode 3, and it starts right now.
Welcome to What's Happening in the Sports World Today, hosted by your host of the Sports for Beginners podcast, Scott McGregor. Today, Scott has some exciting news for all of you listening today. I wonder what it could be, so let's find out and join Scott in the studio now.
"27 dates, not matches, appearances. This past Sunday at WrestleMania. That's right, this past Sunday at WrestleMania, 41, John Cena did it again. He broke the record set by one of the greatest wrestlers in the history of the WWE. He broke Ric Flair's WWE record of 16-time champion by becoming the first wrestler in WWE history to win a WWE Championship belt 17 times after defeating Cody Rhodes in the main event of WrestleMania Sunday. Where does Paul Heyman's loyalty lie? In the main event of WrestleMania 41 Saturday, Paul Heyman he turned on both CM Punk and the OTC, his tribal chief. Roman Reigns, also known not just as the tribal chief and the only tribal chief of the WWE, but he's also known as the head of the table, and as I often like to call him, the big dog, Roman Reigns. But at WrestleMania Saturday and the main event, Paul Heyman sided with Seth freaking Rollins after low blow after low blow to CM Punk a longtime friend of Paul Heyman, and the tribal chief to the wise men, as he is called in the bloodline, Roman Reigns, was also dealt a low blow. Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez also picking up a W on the Monday Night Raw after Mania 41, as they regained their WWE Women's Tag Team Championships, ultimately leading to the betrayal of Becky Lynch, the man who returned at WrestleMania for this match. Main event, Jey Uso has now become main event Jey Uso World Heavyweight Champion. He knocked off Gunther to kick off WrestleMania Saturday. And now the ring general. Well, let's just say the Monday after Mania, he was not happy, and it showed. He viciously attacked Michael Cole and Pat McAfee of the Pat McAfee Show. Shout out to the boys at Pat McAfee's show. But it was Pat McAfee who got the worst of it. Luckily, Pat was able to regain consciousness, and he did speak about it yesterday on the Pat McAfee Show, as you could find out on Pat McAfee's YouTube channel. All things considered, we hope that McAfee is okay. And last night, it came to my attention, as we welcome you in to Weekly in Sports, Episode 3 of Weekly in Sports in podcast format on the podcast era. Hello, I am Scott McGregor. Good morning to all of you tuning in on the East Coast in the morning at the timing of our recording. It is 10:03 a.m. We kicked off a little bit with some WrestleMania talk. And now we're talking about WrestleMania after Mania. And, well, let's just say I'm so happy that Pat is okay. Still sending prayers his way. I would like to take a moment now, before we switch gears from wrestling and specifically WWE, as we continue in the opening segment here, before we switch gears to NHL, and then we're going to talk PWHL later, I would like to take a moment to honor the memory of Don Cherry's daughter, Cindy Cherry, who unfortunately last year on July 15th passed away unexpectedly, at the age of 67 years old, after a short illness, Don Cherry wrote in a post on Twitter. Now it's called X, but I still call it Twitter. He wrote in a post about the unfortunate news. And Don, I hope you're doing well. I really enjoy listening to your podcast that I know Cindy, your daughter, was a big part of, same as your son Tim. And I also know that prior to losing your daughter, you lost your brother. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we talk NHL, at this time, after I read Don Cherry's statement from X, or as I call it, Twitter, I would like to take a moment right now to do 2 minutes of silence in honor of Mr. Cherry's daughter. And I do hope, Dawn, that your wife is also doing well during this difficult time. We'll get to the 2 minutes of silence to honor the life and the legacy of Dawn's daughter, Cindy, in just a few minutes. But first, let me read what Dawn has said. And as many of you know, Don Cherry was fired by Rogers Sportsnet after doing something on Hockey Night in Canada that removed his segment he co-hosted, as we all know, called Coach's Corner, which ran for 33 seasons until Don was fired after a claim he made that, well, as he has said since his firing, if he had the chance to do it again, he would not apologize, but he would have said, everybody. Don wrote, "My daughter Cindy wrote a book about our lives as a father and daughter. She jumped right into my firing at Rogers and doesn't hold back. Tragically, just as Cindy was finishing the book, she suddenly passed away. Great job, Cindy." The title of this book, which released on Monday, April the 21st, 2025. This is a show for Thursday, April 24th, 2025, but we're recording it today on Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. The title of this book, which was released on Monday, or slated to release on Monday and is available now, is called The Don Cherry Story by his daughter, Cindy Cherry. And with that being said, again, I just want to let everyone know Cindy passed away at the age of 67 due to a short illness. So our thoughts and prayers are with Don and his family and friends, as well as Cindy's family and friends. And before we jump into a more happier topic on the NHL side of things, I would now like to do 2 minutes of silence to honor Cindy Cherry. Thank you. On to a more happier note, the NHL Stanley Cup Playoffs are here, and they are well and underway. Our first hockey check-in is in the National Hockey League as we spoke about the Stanley Cup Playoffs here in our program. Lots to talk about here as we go on. And in the Stanley Cup Playoffs, we have, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, we were cut off there as we roll in. We were cut off there as we were rolling in here. But our opening segment continues here. We're into the Stanley Cup playoff check-in that we wanted to do. I just wanted to talk about Cynthia Cherry, who passed away at the age of, yes, I said at the age of 67 years old due to a short illness. That's what we know about. But anyways, on to a more happier note on that front. The Stanley Cup Playoffs, which is where we're going to start our hockey check-ins in the National Hockey League. They are underway, and they began just this past weekend on Saturday, April the 19th, 2025, with no games on April 18th, and the last couple of games played out on April 17th, 2025. Since then, as we prepare to get you ready for the action on Thursday and of course on Wednesday, the day of our recording for this show that will drop tomorrow, we'll give you a quick brief update on how things went down on Tuesday. Now, there was only one game one on the schedule set up in the NHL playoffs of the Stanley Cup, and that was the Battle of Florida, which the Florida Panthers won against the Tampa Bay Lightning. They beat the Tampa Bay Lightning 6-2 in Tampa Bay. Meanwhile, we had a game 2 between the Golden Knights and the Minnesota Wild, in which Minnesota would get even with the Golden Knights, defeating the Golden Knights 5-2 on Tuesday night. They lost game 1 on Sunday, April the 20th, 2025. I was going to say 2024, but no, that's 2025. 4-2 to Vegas. So now it is set up that they will play a game 5 in the Stanley Cup Playoffs first round. Game 2 is set for tomorrow at 9 p.m. I should say game 3. Just make sure I have that right. Game 4 is set for April 26th at 4 p.m. Eastern, which would be Saturday, with Sunday being the 27th. Elsewhere in the game 2 notice, the Carolina Hurricanes have gone up 2-0 in their best of 7 series as they knock off the Devils 3-1 in game number 2. Last time that excuse me there. Last time they played, the Devils were beat 4-1 by Carolina. That series will shift, I should say, from Carolina in Raleigh, North Carolina, to New Jersey, as Carolina looks to eliminate the Devils in these next 2 games on April 25th and 27th. The Battle of Ontario, so far it's 2-0 Ottawa in the best of 7 series, as Ottawa fell on Tuesday night 3-2 in overtime. They fell 6-2 in regulation in Game 1 on Sunday, April the 20th, 2025. And they lost yesterday in overtime 3-2. The Battle of Ontario will resume in Ottawa in Games 3 and 4 on Thursday, April 24th at 7 p.m. And then on Saturday, April 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Right now, for this series, and for that one between the Devils and the Carolina Hurricanes, it looks like we could be seeing an early exit from the New Jersey Devils and the Ottawa Senators. But another series that could be trending that way on the St. Louis Blues side is the Winnipeg Jets, who have won both of their games against the Blues. They have won each game they have played against St. Louis so far this season. The most recent final was on Monday, 2-1. Meanwhile, the Stars have gotten even with the Avalanche at 4-3 a final. That series is now tied 1-1. The Kings took Game 1 against Edmonton 6-5 and now lead that series 1-0. And of course, Montreal dropped their opener game 3-2 in overtime. Stars got even with the Avalanche in overtime, beating the Avalanche 4-3 in overtime. That's why that series is tied at 1-1. So over in the East, two series with a team leading 2-0. And those are the Maple Leafs leading Ottawa 2-0. And Carolina leading the Devils 2-0. Meanwhile, the Panthers and the Capitals have a 1-0 lead over Tampa Bay and Montreal. Winnipeg in the Western Conference side has a 2-0 lead over St. Louis. The Edmonton Oilers can get even with the LA Kings in Game 2 if they are able to win that game before the series shifts to Edmonton, as that game number 2 will be played at Crypto.com Arena. And of course, besides Dallas and Colorado tied up at 1 win apiece and a loss apiece, Minnesota and Vegas are tied at 1 win and 1 loss apiece. Which brings us to tonight's action and of course Thursday's action. It's game number 2 of the Capitals and the Canadiens tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern at the time of our recording. At 10 p.m., the Oilers look to get even with the Los Angeles Kings in game 2 of that series. And it's game 3 of Stars versus Avalanche. That series is tied at 1 game apiece. And the winner of this game will take a 2-1 lead in the series on Thursday, the day you'll most likely be listening to this game, to this show. In terms of game 2s, it's Tampa Bay and Florida in game number 2 at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. At 7 p.m., the Ottawa Senators host the Maple Leafs for the first time in the Battle of Ontario in Ottawa, as the Maple Leafs try to close out the series or get 1 game closer to closing out that series. The Senators have lost games 1 and 2, looking to get 1 and force a possible game 5 in the Battle of Ontario. So the Battle of Florida is at 6:30 p.m. At 7 p.m. it's Ottawa and the Maple Leafs. At 9:30 the Jets will look for their 3rd victory over the Blues. That's at 9:30 p.m. And at 9 p.m. all bets are off, but the winner of this game 3 between Minnesota and the Wild will take a 2-1 lead in the season series. And then game 3s galore on Friday. Canadiens playing in game number 3 against the Capitals, Hurricanes and Devils, Kings and Oilers. So by then we should all be caught up to speed. This just in, on the Avalanche side, Avalanche head coach Jared Bednar has said there is a good chance Gabriel Landeskog will play in game 3. According to Josh Wegman, Gabriel Landeskog is on the verge of suiting up for his first NHL game in nearly 3 years. Colorado Avalanche head coach Jared Bednar said there's a good chance the captain plays in game 3 at home against the Dallas Stars on Thursday. According to Altitude Sports Radio's Connor McGarry, Connor M. Connor, if I pronounced your last name wrong, sincerest apologies. Landeskog last played in an NHL game in Game 6 of the 2022 Stanley Cup Final, where he raised the Stanley Cup after the Avalanche defeated the Tampa Bay Lightning. So he hasn't played in an NHL game since 2022. And if you think about it, that's not very long ago. we're in 2025, and he hasn't played since 2022. So this will be the first game he plays in the Stanley Cup Playoffs in 3 years. If he does play in Game 3 of that series against Dallas. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, going to take our first break of the program. When we come back on Weekly in Sports, it's time for a professional women's hockey league check-in. Plus, we'll reveal the podcasts of the month, Shoutouts. We weren't able to do a March program, so we'll do an April program here. That's what we're doing right now, as we are in the month of April. Hopefully we could do a May program at the end of the month of May, but if not, we'll move over to June. With that said, Weekly in Sports, Episode 3, on the Weekly in Sports podcast format, will continue after this. PWHL Hockey Check-In, Shoutouts of the month for the podcasts, and still much more coming up on Weekly in Sports. Stay with us.
Take another look with Gerda Felix and Melanie Taddeo Malo, two powerful women of diverse backgrounds having genuine, unique, and uncomfortable conversations that everyone needs to have. Join Melanie and Gerda for conversations about what is missing from human connections.
CNT Radio will never give you up. They will never let you down. Nor will they run around or desert you. So join Nick Astley for The Melting Pot every Saturday on CNT Radio. Hang on a minute. He's not Nick Astley. Oh, jings, I've done it wrong. Anyway, just join Nick for The Melting Pot on CNT Radio.
What a busy traffic on this Friday evening. I am almost stuck in this traffic for the last 40 minutes. And there is no way, I think, for me to get to the show. The CNT Radio Song Bank, which is going to start very shortly. It's one of my favorite shows. And my, what a way to wind down for the weekend. Perfect 2 hours of fun-filled music. And she has so many great features. Sound of Music, Undercover, Foreign Exchange. Name that tune. And the big wheel that she spins. For Who's That? Or Where Are We? We cannot forget about the international stage. I have never come across such a great show in my life. I think I will have to press hard on my accelerator and go as fast as I can to get home in time. Wow! Wow! Look! I made it! I am almost there! CNT Radio, making your day brighter, one song at a time.
All right, welcome back into Weekly in Sports, episode 3 of the podcast format era. This is the third episode of our podcast format for Weekly in Sports. I am Scott McGregor. In the opening segment, we talked a little bit about WWE WrestleMania 41. Now we're on the verge of getting ready for WrestleMania 42 down in New Orleans. But a lot to talk about on that end before we get there. Speaking of a lot to talk about, we also did some 2 minutes of silence to honor Don Cherry's daughter, Cindy Cherry, passing away unexpectedly at the age of 67 in a short illness based on what I was able to pick up. And as I read before we did the 2 minutes of silence from Don himself, he posted on his Twitter account, his X account as people call it, but I still call it Twitter. My daughter, Cindy, wrote a book about our lives as a father and daughter. She jumped right into my firing at Rogers and doesn't hold back. Tragically, just as Cindy was finishing the book, she suddenly passed away. And he ended with, "Great job, Cindy," in case you missed that earlier. We honor Don's daughter, as we did earlier, with a 2 minutes of silence. Now let's talk about the women's hockey side of things. And as we take a look at the standings here, as we get closer to their playoffs, Montreal, just like they did in the inaugural season, which was the 2024 season, this is the 2024-2025 season, and second season of the existence of the PWHL. Montreal has clinched a playoff berth, so they are in. Minnesota and New York are at the bottom of the barrel. Each team has 3 games remaining. The record for Boston and Toronto: Boston is 8-6-4-9. Toronto is 12-2-5-8. Montreal's record is 11-6-3-7. Record for Ottawa: 11 wins, 1 overtime win, 4 overtime losses, and 11 losses. Minnesota is 8-5-4-10. New York is 7-4-4-11. And it looks like New York is going to be out of contention once again. And Minnesota, the defending Walter Cup champions, the Frost, are probably going to not have an opportunity to defend their title, as they sit fifth, in the division, in the standings right now. The action continued in April. As things started slow in April, on April 2nd and April 1st, with 2 shutouts galore. Ottawa defeated Boston 4-0 at the Tsonga Center on Wednesday, April the 2nd. On Tuesday, April 1st, Montreal lost 1-0 to the New York Sirens. The Boston Fleet and the Ottawa Charge were battling, by the way. The Victoire defeated were defeated by New York 1-0 on Tuesday, April 1st. The action returns this weekend on April 26, 2025, when Montreal is hosted by Ottawa at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Then the Boston Fleet will host the Toronto Scepters. And the New York Sirens are in Minnesota on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, from St. Paul, Minnesota at the XL Energy Center. The game at the Tsonga Center can be seen on NESN and CBC. The Ottawa game against Montreal can be seen on TSN and RDS. The other action, as the action continues after Sunday, Montreal will host Boston on Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern from Place Bell. The Toronto Scepters will host the New York Sirens on Tuesday night at 7 p.m. from the Coca-Cola Coliseum. The Ottawa Charge hosting Minnesota on the final day of the April month. Minnesota will be hosted by Ottawa at TD Place. The final Battle of Ontario will take place on a triple header on Saturday, May 3rd, as the season comes to an end. Coca-Cola Coliseum is where you can catch Ottawa and Toronto. At 1 p.m. Eastern, you've got Minnesota and Boston at the Tsonga Center in what I call the Walter Cup rematch. It's looking pretty interesting between Minnesota and Boston. But we'll see what kind of Walter Cup rematches we get after Season 2 wraps up. And I do plan to get Erica Lindsay Ayala on the horn on Sports for Beginners, or even on this show, to talk a little women's hockey. The last showdown is at the Prudential Center, and that is on CBC, as the Montreal Victoire are hosted by the New York Sirens at 2 p.m. Eastern. The playoffs start after the season wraps up in May, and right now one of those players one of those teams will hit the postseason, and that is Montreal. They are locked in at number 1 with an X to their name. And of course, we shall see who joins them. We shall see who joins them. I personally think Minnesota, they had a good run, but they just I don't think they're gonna make it this year. I really don't. But Boston, Ottawa, and Toronto, oh yeah, they're gonna make it. Okay, maybe I don't know about Ottawa. If Minnesota is able to get more points and take over Ottawa, then perhaps Minnesota is able to sneak into the playoffs and have a chance to defend their title. But the question I have for Montreal Victoire fans is this right now. Should this still be following the same format it followed in the inaugural season? Montreal, who do you want to face out of the top 4 right now as we speak? Heading into the weekend. Do you want to face Boston for a little rematch? Or would you rather face Ottawa? Let's just say Minnesota and New York miss the playoffs. Because Toronto will play either Ottawa or Boston, whoever Montreal does not choose. But let's just say theoretically, Minnesota, given the position they're in at the time we are talking to you now, let's just say they don't make the playoffs. And they miss the playoffs for the first time in their franchise's history after they won a championship in their inaugural season. Let's say that happens. If I'm personally Montreal, I would feel more confident playing Ottawa than I would playing Boston, even though we played Boston before we had team names and had an interesting series last year in the playoffs. So personally, I think they should go with Ottawa and give Boston to Toronto. But it's up to them. Again, the action gets going again this weekend with a doubleheader. Montreal and Ottawa, and Toronto and Boston this Saturday, 12 p.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. Eastern is when the pucks are scheduled to drop. Then 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, New York and Minnesota will drop the puck on Sunday. So personally, I think Minnesota has some ground to make up in these final 3 games that everybody has left, as everybody's played 27 games this season, barring the NHL World or the IHF breaks that they've had. And of course, we've had our second trade deadline of the PWHL League's existence. We have also heard, I haven't heard news about it from the actual PWHL website, but I saw it on the Discord app. We've heard news about a potential expansion and who is going to be there. And speaking of that, before we jump into the podcasting part of this, where I talk about some shoutouts, it was noted on April the 15th, 2025 at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time that the 2025 PWHL draft will be held in Ottawa on June 24th, 2025, which is a Tuesday, and the presenting sponsors are Upper Deck and Hard Rock. Here's what the article says. Hard Rock Hotel and Casino will be the official host. Upper Deck named presenting partner of the PWHL draft. New York and Toronto, April 15th, 2025. The Professional Women's Hockey League announced today that the 2025 PWHL draft, presented by Upper Deck, will take place on Tuesday, June 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Ottawa, Ontario. The event will bring together the league's leading prospects, well-known figures from the women's hockey community, and the PWHL's dedicated fan base to celebrate the next wave of league stars. This will be the first ever event held at the brand new Hard Rock Live Theater venue, which is currently part of the $350 million construction and expansion project. The new amenities are expected to open to the public very soon. The Hard Rock Hotel and Casino is the exclusive brick and mortar casino partner of the Ottawa Charge. Prospective players have until Thursday, May 8th to declare their eligibility for selection regarding or in the 2025 draft. Additional details regarding the draft, including format and ticketing information, will be shared in the coming weeks. It does say that fans who are interested in attending the 2025 PWHL draft presented by Upper Deck can join the priority list in a link that says here. Fans who have filled out the form will receive first access to information and offers to attend official PWHL events, including the 2025 PWHL draft. Collectors can also visit www.upperdeck.com/PWHL First Edition to find a hobby shop or online retailer to purchase PWHL trading cards. Now that seems like a great deal. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, rolling right along. We talk some hockey, talk some WrestleMania. I do want to get in a couple of takeaways on the NHL side. We'll do that later. But once again, mark the calendars for PWHL fans. Mark the calendars June 24th. That's a Tuesday, June 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. June 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And that is when the 2025 PWHL draft will be held. So it will be held in the summer of 2025 at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Ottawa, Ontario. All right. Time for some shoutouts. It's time for some shoutouts of the month. Here we go. Or as the great Shania Twain would say, let's go, girls. No, that didn't sound right. I'll say let's go, boys and girls. So I have 3 shoutouts. Number 1 is going to go to Ryan McCormick. And Ryan, I understand you are, I won't say vouching to get Neil Smith on Sports for Beginners or Weekly in Sports, whatever the case was. But I do appreciate your emails. I have seen each and every one of them. And before I considered anything, especially with the NHL Wraparound podcast, which is going to receive our first shout out of the month, I just want to let you know that I felt it might be best if I checked the show out first before committing to doing so. And so far, I am very impressed with both Mr. Neil Smith and his co-host as well, or his host as well. I don't know who's the co-host or who's the host. I don't really know. I have to look that up again. But really nice job for the NHL Wraparound. If you have not seen the NHL Wraparound podcast, check it out on YouTube at the NHL Wraparound podcast YouTube channel. I will have a link to their Spotify for you there in our show notes, if I'm able to bring it in. But the NHL Wraparound podcast, and specifically Ryan McCormick, is going to get our first shout out of the month. The second shout out of the month, that is going to go to the boys at Gate 14 Podcast. Johnny and Avery, and everybody else in between. Great content on Gate 14. Always enjoy listening when I can. Gate 14 forever. Things are looking a little bit shaky for the Blue Jays right now, as they are falling down in the AL East. But I have a feeling that if we are able to get a couple of wins, we can stay right where we want to be. And that's, as many people would say, that's in playoff contention. Speaking of that, our final shout out of the month, because we're going to do 3. Well, this is really a collection of shout outs of the month here. Because once again, Locked On Podcast Network is going to get the shout out. So shout out once again to the Locked On Podcast Network. You guys do an absolutely wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job. And I'll add in one more quick shout out. It's not a podcast shout out of the month, but given at the time this drops, it will drop when it will drop tomorrow. And that, funnily enough, is a birthday for someone that I know from Maple Leaf Toastmasters. So I would like to take this opportunity, even if this does drop the day after that happens, but I hope it'll drop tomorrow, as this is being recorded the day before that day. I want to wish, as a shout out, I want to wish my great friend Melanie Taddeo a wonderful happy birthday. Her birthday is tomorrow. So happy birthday to you, Melanie. Hope you're enjoying the show. Hope you have a great day tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you at our Toastmaster meeting. And speaking of Toastmasters, there is still time for you to grab tickets to the speech contests going down in St. Catharines in Thorold, Ontario, as we are in the spring conference week at Maple Leaf Toastmasters and Toastmasters International. Not sure what Toastmasters is? Send me an email at sportsforbeginnerspodcast8231@gmail.com and use the subject, what is Toastmasters? And I will connect with a fellow Toastmaster member so that we can better understand what Toastmasters actually is. All right. When we return after this final commercial break of the show, we're only doing 2 breaks in the program. We were cut off in our opening moments of the show. But when we return, ladies and gents, after this short break, some key takeaways from this season in Penguins hockey. And a prediction for one of the Stanley Cup Playoff current series going down in round 1. That all is next. Plus, as we wrap it up, what can you expect on the next episode of Weekly in Sports as the podcast era continues? We'll talk about that. What can you expect on the possible May or June show of Weekly in Sports? And of course, I want to get into some takeaways I have from the 2024-2025 Pittsburgh Penguins hockey season. We'll do that next. Stay with us.
I wonder if I could make it. It's almost getting to 8 o'clock p.m., and I am still a few more steps away from home to get to my computer to listen to CNT Radio's Cosmopolitan Culture Club. the best of the best music from around the world. Can't wait! I think I made it! CNT Radio, making your day brighter, one song at a time.
Looking for a good hockey podcast that covers your favorite hockey teams and mine? Check out On the Ice and Behind the Benches, where we chat about our favorite hockey teams from puck drop to the last play of the action. To learn more, follow the On the Ice and Behind the Benches Facebook page. Search On the Ice and Behind the Benches.
Looking for conversations on books and more, as well as tutorials on using your favorite devices and applications? You've come to the right place. Join us weekly on Spicy Techie, where Ali and Sienna provide insightful conversations, as well as useful tips and tricks to help you along on your technological journey. To learn more, tune into the show and like the Spicy Techie Facebook page. Search for Spicy Techie.
All right, we're back here on Weekly in Sports, the podcast, Weekly in Sports, end of the month April program for 2025. Everything began in 2024 when this was, well, actually, maybe it was 2023. I don't really remember. Regardless, we did do shows in 2024. But I am your host, Scott McGregor of the program. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We really, really appreciate it. As I said before, my name is Scott McGregor, and this is Weekly in Sports. It's time for me to do a little Penguins takeaways from the 2024-2025 season. And there's not a lot of takeaways I could have, but when it comes down to it, and when it comes down to per se it comes down to some takeaways I do have from the season. I do like Tristan Jarry. I do like the Tristan Jarry bounce back season. He had a little bit of trouble over the course of the season, and that's why he ended up in Wilkes-Barre for a little while, but I do like what I saw from him in the games that he was good in, and in those games that he wasn't great in, but still decent enough in my opinion. I also really liked the milestones that Penguin players like Crosby and Brian Rust and Pittsburgh Penguins rookies were able to bring up, whether it was their first NHL game in the NHL or their career 500th goal, or they score their first NHL goal of their NHL career. And I guess my biggest takeaway from the season was Nedeljkovic doing what Jarry did last year, scoring a goalie goal. Wow, I mean, despite the record of the Pittsburgh Penguins this season and where they fell in the standings, it was definitely great to see this team, the Pittsburgh Penguins, go out there and win the last game of the season. Despite finishing with a record of 34, 36, and 12. I mean, is that a good record? To me, it looks like a good record, but there was not enough points that the Penguins scored to have any hopes of making the playoffs this year. They finished with a points total of 80. And therefore, they're not in the playoffs right now. The three teams in the Metropolitan Division that are in the playoffs right now are the Capitals, Hurricanes, and Devils. In the Atlantic, the Maple Leafs, Lightning, and Panthers, as well as in the Eastern Conference wild card, the Senators and the Canadiens are in the playoffs. And in the Western Conference, the wild cards are the Blues and the Wild. They are taking on teams in the Stanley Cup playoffs, including the Jets, Golden Knights. The Kings are taking on the Oilers, and the Stars and Avalanche are taking on one another as well. So it was, I guess you could call it a lackluster season for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But there was just times where you just thought, are we going to be able to even make the postseason? I sent out a comment on a live shot that DK Pittsburgh Sports did with DK and Taylor Haase of DK Pittsburgh Sports. And they liked this comment. So, let me just tell you what I said. If I can find it here. It might be under my socials. Let's see. Here we go. Here we go. I said, missed the live shot yesterday, because it was a yesterday thing. DK and Taylor, but I am grateful for everything that you do for the Pittsburgh Penguins. I don't want to... Excuse me. I don't want to waste Sidney Crosby's final years in Pittsburgh or his career. But my question is, if Kyle Dubas is going to go out and tried to bring players like Mitch Marner or Nathan McKinnon, etc., to Pittsburgh, what kinds of players in Pittsburgh, what would the Penguins need to give up in order to get those kinds of players in Pittsburgh? Love the daily shots, DK, and both of you keep up the great work you do at DK Pittsburgh Sports. And I end it with, let's go Pens. Now, I'm not sure if it was DK or if it was Taylor, but one of them hearted my comment. And if it was you, DK, or if it was you, Taylor, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. We'll try to make it out. I'll try to make it out to the live shots when I can. But with all that being said, with all that being said, apologies for my clearing of my throat there. Apologies. Those are, I should say, my thoughts on the season and some of my takeaways. It wasn't a good season for the Pittsburgh Penguins by a long shot, but the Penguins tried to do what they had to do in order to get the job done, and they just didn't get the job done when it comes down to getting into the playoffs. How does that rank them in the lottery for the draft lottery? I don't know. Maybe we'll get a first round pick. I don't know. But speaking of drafts, the NHL draft is tomorrow, I believe. It might be this week, it might be next week, I don't really know. I'll double check to make sure. But it'll be interesting to see on the Buffalo Bills side of things what the Bills do and what they get in the draft at the NFL draft this year. They, unlike the Penguins, made the playoffs last season by also winning their 5th straight AFC East title under head coach Sean McDermott, and have recently brought back Tre'Davious White. And I hope to talk to Ryan Talbot about that in the coming days. Get his thoughts on Trey White. Ryan and I have actually been in conversation. All right, we're with you for just about 5 more minutes now as we are approaching 12 noon p.m. Eastern Time. But it is almost 11:45 at this time of our recording. So we're going to be with you for another few minutes. But it is time for my Stanley Cup prediction. And this is a prediction for the Battle of Ontario, which is going on right now. Terribly sorry for the interruption there, but again, as I mentioned, we're with you now here. We're back here with you for just a few more moments. We're back here with you for just a few more moments. We were back here for 5 more minutes, but now we're actually back here with you for just about 4 more minutes here. My prediction time is about the NHL Battle of Ontario going on in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. And this is what I predict. Toronto is now leading 2-1, and I predict Ottawa is going to force a Game 5 and a Game 6, and then Toronto is going to win the series in Game 6. I don't believe Toronto will win this series 4-0. I really don't. Now that might be negative Maple Leaf fans to you, but to me, as a Pittsburgh Penguins hockey fan, I am rooting for the Buds because the Penguins are out of the playoffs. So I'm rooting for the Buds. But let me be clear. I truly believe believe that the Maple Leafs will win this series, but I believe they will win it in 6 games. Maybe they'll win in 7, I don't know. But give me Maple Leafs in 7, and that is my prediction for that series. Give me Maple Leafs in 6, that is my prediction for that Stanley Cup playoff series. Okay. What to expect next time on Weekly in Sports, which will be hopefully at the end of the month of May. We will do our 4th show. I'm hoping to do it at the end of the month of May, which will be Thursday, May 29th. We'll do the show at before the conclusion of the Texas Rangers series in Texas between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Texas Rangers. So I'm hoping to record on Wednesday, May the 28th, 2025. And as we are coming into May, may the 4th be with you, because Sunday, not this Sunday, but the next Sunday, is May 4th. And to that end, I say, may the 4th be with you. Looking forward to that. So hopefully we'll record the show on Wednesday, the 28th of May, 2025. That will be our end of the month May program and also episode 4. But if we are not able to do that, only if we are not able to do that, we will be back with you on June the 25th, the day after the PWHL draft, to bring you the end of the month June program. And we're going to be focusing heavily on baseball and hockey as we inch closer on that show to the MLB All-Star break, which I believe is coming up in July. That, of course, will drop on June the 26th, 2025, and be episode 4 if we are not able to do a May program. If we are able to do a May program, that will come your way on, I should say, it will come your way as episode 5, and will also come your way on June 26, 2025. Episode 4, if we are able to do the May program, will come your way on May the 29th, 2025. That is it for us right now on Weekly in Sports, but I'd like to invite you to go check out the remainder of our Triple Trouble on Sports for Beginners. As we are currently recapping the homestand between the Blue Jays and the Braves, and of course, we are recapping the homestand finale between the Blue Jays and the Mariners. So be sure to check those out on Blue Jays Game Recap. And for everything that I mentioned, rest in peace, Cindy Cherry. And for all of our listeners, we want to thank you for joining us here today. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Subscribe to our Discord server so you can get in on the action on Weekly in Sports before we record our programs. Follow us on Facebook at the Sports for Beginners Facebook page. And of course, follow this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. This one is available right now on just Apple and Spotify. Probably will be released on other platforms later, but it is also available on YouTube under Weekly in Sports with Scott, the YouTube channel. And if you would like to stay up to date so you never miss an episode, whether it's on the Sports for Beginners front, it's a post-game show, or it's Weekly in Sports in general, hit that like button if you like what you heard in this episode at its fullest. Hit subscribe if you really like it. Tell all your friends. And until next time, my name is Scott McGregor. Wishing you, if you're driving as you've been listening, a safe drive home or drive to work, depending on when you are listening to the show. And we'll see you next time on Weekly in Sports, the podcast, My name is Scott McGregor. We will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today for your weekly dose of sports content. If you have any questions or thoughts on this show that you'd like to let our host know about, simply send us a voice message on Anchor and let us know what you think we can improve on to help us out on the show. And remember that it is not goodbye, it is until next time. See you Wednesday.
Bills are happening now. They're making it happen now. You've got the spirit, a lot of spirit, yeah. You've got the spirit. Just watch it happen now. Hey, 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 hey. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. The Bills make me wanna.